Hi everyone, welcome back to our Histo PH family, where forgotten Filipino history finally comes alive. Today, we're diving deep into the Filipino president who saved 1,300 Jews from Hitler and nobody knows about it. A story that rewrites everything we thought we knew about our beginnings. 1938. The world is watching Hitler rise to power. Jewish families are desperate to escape. They're begging every country on earth, please, let us in. We'll die if we stay. America says no. Britain says no. Canada says no. 32 countries meet at a conference, and almost all of them slam their doors shut. But halfway around the world, a man you've never heard of is about to do something extraordinary. His name is Manuel Quezon. He's the president of the Philippines, and he's about to risk everything to save lives when the richest countries on earth won't. This is the true story they erased from history, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why it matters more now than ever. The world turns its back. Let me paint you a picture of 1938. This is before the full horror of the Holocaust is known, but everyone can see what's coming. Hitler has been in power for 5 years. Jewish people in Germany and Austria are being stripped of their rights, their businesses, their homes. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, has just happened. Synagogues are burning, Jewish shops are destroyed, people are being beaten in the streets. Families are panicking. They know they need to leave now, so they start applying for visas to anywhere that will take them. And this is where the story gets dark. In July 1938, representatives from 32 countries meet in Evian, France, for a conference specifically about Jewish refugees. President Roosevelt called this meeting, "The whole world is watching. Surely the civilized nations of the world will help, right?" Wrong. Country after country stands up and makes excuses. Australia says they don't have a racial problem and don't want to import one. The UK says Palestine is full. They can't take more. Canada's representative says none is too many. The United States, which called this conference, refuses to increase its quotas. Out of 32 countries, only one agrees to take significant numbers, the Dominican Republic, and even that's complicated. Historians believe their dictator wanted to whiten his population. Imagine being a Jewish parent at this moment. You're watching the most powerful nations on earth, countries with vast lands, massive resources, and speeches about freedom and democracy. You're watching them all say, "Not our problem." You're holding your children's hands and you're realizing, we're going to die here. No one will help us. But then, a telegram arrives from a place most Europeans can barely find on a map. If you're amazed by our ancestors' story, the Filipino president who saved 1,300 Jews from Hitler and nobody knows about it, help us hit our 500-like goal. Drop a comment about your favorite fact and subscribe to join the Histo PH family. And don't forget to hype this video. Enter Manuel Quezon, Manila, Philippines, 1937. Before we get to what Quezon did, you need to understand who he was, because this context is everything. Manuel Luis Quezon y Molina was born in 1878, when the Philippines was still a Spanish colony. His father fought in the Philippine Revolution against Spain. Young Manuel grew up watching his country fight for freedom, first against the Spanish, then against the Americans who took over after the Spanish-American War. Quezon himself became a revolutionary. He fought in the Philippine-American War, a brutal conflict that killed between 200,000 to possibly 1 million Filipinos. The Americans called it pacification. Quezon called it colonization. But here's what's fascinating about Quezon. He didn't become bitter. He became strategic. He realized he could fight for Philippine independence through politics and diplomacy. He went to Washington, D.C., lobbied the U.S. Congress, and eventually became the first president of the Philippine Commonwealth in 1935, a transitional government moving toward full independence. So by 1937, when he's watching what's happening to Jewish people in Europe, Quezon understands oppression on a cellular level. He knows what it means to have your homeland taken. He knows what it means to be seen as less than human. He knows what it feels like when powerful nations ignore your suffering. And he refuses to be one of those nations that looks away. Working with Paul V. McNutt, the American High Commissioner in Manila, Quezon starts secretly crafting a plan, not to save a dozen people, not 100. His initial vision? To save 10,000 Jewish refugees. Think about the audacity of this. The Philippines isn't wealthy. It's still technically under American control. It has its own poverty, its own problems. By every practical measure, Quezon should be saying, "We can't afford this." But instead, he says, "We have room. We have land. We have hearts. Send them to us." The rescue begins. Between 1937 and 1941, approximately 1,300 Jewish refugees make the impossible journey from Europe to Manila. Let me walk you through what this actually meant. First, you have to escape Nazi-controlled territory, already incredibly dangerous. Then, you need money for passage, which most Jewish families don't have because the Nazis have seized their assets. Then, you have to travel halfway around the world, through the Suez Canal, across the Indian Ocean, through Southeast Asia, a journey that takes weeks on a ship. And at the end of that journey, a tropical country where you don't speak the language, don't know the culture, don't know if you'll ever see your homeland again. But you go, because the alternative is death. The refugees who arrived in Manila came from all over: Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia. They were doctors, lawyers, engineers, musicians, professors. The Nazis had stripped them of everything except their skills and their will to survive. And here's where Quezon becomes even more remarkable. He doesn't just let them in. He welcomes them. He personally greets some of the arriving families. He helps them find housing. He connects them with jobs. He treats them with dignity. One refugee, Ralph Price, later wrote, "When we arrived in Manila, we were broken. We had been treated like vermin in our own country. And then this man, this Filipino president, he shook our hands. He looked us in the eyes. He made us feel human again." Jewish refugees opened businesses in Manila. They started medical practices. They taught at universities. They joined orchestras. They became part of the community. Filipinos and Jews worked side by side, shared meals, became friends. There's a famous story about a Jewish baker who started making challah bread in Manila, and Filipino customers loved it so much they started ordering it for their own celebrations. That's what integration actually looks like. But Quezon wasn't done. His bigger vision was still in motion. He identified a large tract of land on the southern island of Mindanao, thousands of acres, where he wanted to establish an agricultural settlement. Not a ghetto, not a camp, a real community where Jewish families could farm, build homes, raise children, and live in peace. He was negotiating with Jewish organizations. He was working with agricultural experts. The infrastructure was being planned. He was this close to creating a full-scale refuge that could house thousands more. And then everything changed in one morning. The war arrives. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack the U.S. Pacific Fleet. And just hours later, Japanese forces invade the Philippines. Quezon's dream dies in that moment. The Philippines becomes a battlefield. Manila, which had been a sanctuary, becomes a war zone. And those 1,300 Jewish refugees who escaped Hitler, they're now trapped in another nightmare: Japanese occupation. Some refugees were interned in camps alongside American and Filipino civilians. Some went into hiding. Some joined the resistance. But they survived. Most of them survived because 4 years earlier, one man said yes. As for Quezon, he has to evacuate. The man who saved so many lives now has to flee his own country. He escapes to Corregidor, then eventually to the United States, where he sets up a government in exile. And here's the tragedy. Quezon is dying. He has tuberculosis. He's had it for years, but the stress of war is destroying him. He spends his final years in Washington, fighting for Philippine independence, fighting for his people, but he's fading. On August 1st, 1944, Manuel Quezon dies in New York. He's 65 years old. He never sees his country liberated. He never sees Philippine independence, which comes in 1946. He never sees the memorial they'll build to honor the refugees he saved. The man who defied the world to save lives dies in exile, in a borrowed country, dreaming of home. But his legacy? That lives on in ways he never imagined.